Yes, this is Doug Feildmen, Douglas A. Feildmen. I was born in New York City in the borough of the Bronx in January 29th, 1947. And I'd like to tell a story about my coming out and my experience at the Stonewall. I was a student at City College. I had some sexual experiences before that, going back to even when I was 13, but I didn't consider myself gay. I just thought I had this desire that, seemed a little unusual, and a same-sex desire. But at City College, I was a student. In spring of 1967, I was asked to do a research project on anything I'd like, and I said, I'd like to do a study on homosexuality in the world today. I didn't quite know how to do it. Someone said, well, why don't you go down to Christopher Street and do the interviews there? So I went down to Christopher Street, cruised people on the street, and instead of having sex with them, I asked them if they would like to be interviewed for my research project. And I interviewed about 10 people, took their oral histories, and it went very well. I got an A in the paper. And I also, one of the persons asked me if I've ever been to a gay bar, and I told him no. He said, well, you really can't understand the gay community until you've been to a gay bar. So we went to, this is in April of '67, I went to this bar that was under the 59th Street Bridge, otherwise correctly known as the Queensboro Bridge, in Manhattan, named Old Vic's. And I went in, and immediately he insisted I start dancing with him. I didn't realize it was a dance bar until I got there, a gay dance bar. And so I was very embarrassed at the time because I had a red face, I felt very uncomfortable because I've never danced with another man before. I've danced with women.
You were about, what, 20?
I was 20 at the time.
20 at the time.
But we did dance, and we had a good time, and I left there, and then about 2 months later, I thought about it. I said, you know what? I want to go back to the Old Vic's. And I looked myself in the mirror and said, in the vernacular at the time, you are a homosexual. Do it. Go back to Old Vic's. And so I did. I went by myself. At that time, I didn't have many friends, many straight friends. I had maybe a couple. But the moment I sort of entered the gay community, I immediately made, it seemed like dozens of friends, very good friends, very solid friends. And I realized there was something about the gay community that went far beyond being gay. In 1968, the following year, so I went to some bars in '67, like Bonsoir and a couple of the others. In '68, I discovered Stonewall, went there on a regular basis, and so I had enjoyed that. I remember it was actually, they turned it into 2 stores after, but it was one bar occupying 2 storefront properties.
Okay.
You come in, and there was a long bar there, and then on the left there was another bar as well. I think there was dancing, as I recall. I'm not totally sure about that, but there was a lot of cruising going on, and I met a few people, I think, over my stay there. In '68, I went into grad school to study to become an anthropologist. I realized at that time that anthropology was the study of cultures, and the gay community was a culture. It had grown into a culture, probably always was a culture, but it really became a very organized culture. at that time, with gay publications and so forth, gay bars. So in the following year, I just got back from Europe on a trip, and I had heard from my friends that they're having rioting going on at the Stonewall. And so I wasn't too surprised because I heard this is where class issues come in. And I viewed myself as sort of middle class or upper middle class, and I had heard that it's getting more of a lower class crowd at that time. And actually, I was part of that world. I sort of stopped going to the Stonewall, in part because my friend said, don't go there, it's changed, it's not what it used to be. So I didn't go to the Stonewall on a regular basis in early '69 before it got raided. But when I heard there was a riot, I was very interested and very supportive of it at the time. And I wanted to...
Is that because there was a lot of harassment going on in some of the bars, or write-ups in the paper or whatever?
There was, well, if in New York City, I had heard before I came out that the other mayor, the previous mayor, Wagner, had actually closed, with the exception of 2, every gay bar in New York City.
Wow.
Because of the World's Fair. So he closed it in 1964 and 65. They begin to come back in 66, I believe, because it was then a new mayor, Mayor Lindsay, who was more progressive, more liberal, and word got out, basically, anyone this side of the Mississippi should go to New York City, anyone west should go to San Francisco. So New York City was becoming flooded with gay people. By the way, let me backtrack for a moment. I remember as a teenager, there was sex all over the place in the streets, in the bars, in the subways. There was a little alcove in the subways. People were having sex there during the subway rides, and usually at night. And I think the reason is that this is around 64, 65, and I think the reason was that bars were closed. People had nowhere to go.
To meet people, right.
To meet people.
Yeah.
And the bushes, what are called the bushes in Central Park, were active. So anyway, getting back to 69, so I was there about a block away on Barrow Street with a friend in Greenwich Village, in the village. And he said, I'm going over to see what's going on at Stonewall tonight, meaning the riots. And why don't you come? And I heard that there was tear gas being used. I was accidentally caught up twice being tear gassed on 2 different occasions for the Bastille Day activities. I happened to be in France in 1968 on July 14th. And wrong day, wrong time, wrong place. And so I got tear gas, and I said, I'm not going if there's tear gas. And he told me he understands there is. So I decided not to go. So I wish I had, in retrospect. Anyway, I did go to the Stonewall after the riot, like a day or 2 after the riots, just to take a look and see what was going on. And I saw all these parking meters bent out of shape at about a 45-degree angle. Yeah. And the rumor then was that the drag queens got so angry that that they knocked it down.
Don't mess with the drag queen.
No. By the way, I've since read about the Stonewall, what happened that night, and there seems to be a myth that they were all drag queens. They weren't. There was the ones who were arrested, the police arrested, were the ones working at the bars, the bartenders, and the drag queens. And they let everyone else go. But when they went out, they didn't leave. They hung around, and then they saw the drag queens being thrown into the paddy wagon, and that's when the rioting began. So, which doesn't surprise me.
No.
The time was right. The view was the day of bar rage should be over, and here was an unexcusable bar raid that was occurring. Now, in I believe it was February or March of 1970. My friends were debating whether they should go. They hear there's going to be a march in June commemorating what happened the previous year, and they were debating whether to go or not. What happened at that time was there was another bar raid in New York City, a gay bar raid, and the police so much terrorized everyone that one of the persons who was from Argentina, who was afraid of being exposed to whoever, literally jumped out the window and became critically injured. And that really created...
Oh my gosh!
We're recording.
He jumped out the window and was critically injured, and that really motivated at least my friends to all go to the march. They insisted I come. I said, no problem. I'm marching.
Yeah.
I'm just as angry, as upset as you are. We'll go march. And I remember in the march in June of 1970, when I was there, the first march, they refused to allow a permit to march down Fifth Avenue, but they let us march up 6th Avenue.
Oh, okay.
So, which is not as good.
Yeah.
But we did that. We started from the village. I think we went up to Central Park somewhere, up 6th Avenue. We didn't have the whole street. They allowed half the street to be traffic going by. The other thing is that getting through the village, we were such a large crowd that we held up quite a bit of traffic. And since there was so little publicity, there was so little publicity that people were caught up in the traffic, and I was said to my friend, good, I'm glad they didn't hear about us, so they will know that we need to be, we're a real community, we need to be in the newspapers, we need to be publicized, people should know about us. Should we stop at
this thank you.
We're up to about 1970.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Doug. This is great. Thank you.
There's more that I've done, but this covers those.
Yeah, this is great. Appreciate it.